intrigued, and not just because of her name. The letter arrived at a point in my life when my early literary fame was not even a hazy memory for most people. One novel to my name. One, and one only. Unable to repeat the trick, I'd long since been written off as a one-hit wonder, albeit that one hit had been enough, at the time, for reviewers to declare it a masterpiece of extraordinary vision. One might almost, one reviewer speculated, be tempted to pronounce it a work of genius. Naturally, they clamoured for more, and I dined out quite comfortably on this early success for a couple of years until the novelty wore off and I was dismissed as another literary fluke, a thrilling one-night stand, but clearly not a stayer. A tease, in fact. The fairy dust settled, and I retreated, the heavy gilded doors to the literary world closing on me until such time as I could present it with another glorious offering. One gets over every disappointment eventually, or learns to live with it. Unable to settle to regular employment, I took a succession of part-time jobs, more or less unsatisfactory, before I found what I must think of as my niche. My current job, housekeeper, cleaner, and cook for a vicar, was a good fit, and I was tolerably content in a minor key sort of way. Madeleine's letter arrived on the doormat like a flare from another world. Dear Madeleine, thank you for your letter. I receive so few proper letters these days. It's heartening to know my solitary novel is still being read and enjoyed. Literature has always been, for me, a solace and a source of wonder. But I sometimes think I would have retained my sense of wonder rather better had I not felt compelled to make my own contribution. The weight of expectation, publishers and readers too eager for a second novel, did rather crush me, the result being my well-documented literary constipation. People tell me I've secured a kind of immortality and that some of the greatest writers are remembered primarily for a single book. One thinks of Lolita, Vanity Fair, The Great Gatsby, that soars above the rest, not to mention the number of writers who only ever produced one novel. You can supply the titles as well as I. Still, I would feel a fraud to describe myself as a writer, and I rarely give the book much thought, so it's nice to discover that it has a life of its own, independent of me. I broke off, unsure how to continue, conscious of speaking too much of myself, yet what else could I write about? Madeleine had told me hardly anything about herself, and to ask questions would be to invite a correspondence she didn't necessarily want. Did I? Hard to say. I had a few acquaintances, a job, even until 6 months ago, a lover. But since the death of Madeleine, my Madeleine, I'd always felt a sort of spiritual loneliness. If I didn't finish the letter now, I knew I never would. It would remain on my writing desk, one of those little jobs one means to get round to but never quite manages. The longer I left it, the harder it would be to complete, the less urgent it would become, until eventually it would be swept into the waste bin along with ancient cheque stubs, dentist reminder letters, bus tickets, and all the other administrative detritus one hangs on to for no good reason. Perhaps what I had written thus far would suffice. I had, indeed, written far more, and rather more candidly, than I had in response to the first flurry of letters I'd received when the book was published. Back in those golden days, I treated unsolicited correspondence with a kind of patronising tolerance, accepting praise, the gushing insistence that my book had spoken to them personally, as my right, responding with a few scribbled lines of thanks, and, in the case of would-be writers, advice on how to find a literary agent. I cringe now, of course I do, at how little thought I gave to those people who'd been moved enough to put pen to paper. How had I dared to dismiss them so readily? Yet it wouldn't do to attempt to atone for the scant interest I'd shown in the lives of my admirers by writing an inappropriately lengthy letter to Madeleine. Therefore I added a couple of lines wishing her all the best and thanking her for taking the time to write. Trite, commonplace words. I added a P.S. Hope you've settled into your new home, which struck a false note. It would have to do. I'd post it when I went to work. My employer